And this is at Kelsey Theater. How big is Kelsey Theater? How many people show up?
I think like 400.
It's close to 400 seats. It's like 380 to 390 seats. The theater itself, there's not really any bad seats in the house.
No.
It's pretty modern look. I mean,
It's been around since the 70s.
But it seems still modern. It looks kind of modern veneer to it, I think.
What do the tickets run?
The tickets, I think, are
I think
14,
20.
16, 18.
We
Or
pay-
they
For our
pay
show,
$17.95
because of
something.
our show is a $20 ticket, and if you're like a student or a senior, there are discounts, and if you buy the season, there are discounts. If you buy the entire season.
That's a really nice price.
That's
I
a
mean, you're
fantastic
looking at
price.
Broadway, 100 is a bargain, right?
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
And that's
I mean, I was thinking you were going to say 50, 60.
No, and there are
Yeah.
so many community theaters that, quite honestly, don't have the facility that we do. That are not comfortable, that are drafty, that are the sound is terrible. We have a brand new soundboard that charge twice as much. So Kelsey Theater really is a hidden gem. It's a high quality experience for a small amount of money.
Yeah, so I mean, Shrek is a name.
Yes,
Mhm.
and we're hoping that people who aren't typically theater people will be drawn because they're familiar with the movie, they're familiar with the character, and maybe this would be their
They
first
also know that it's
introduction into theater.
that it's a Broadway play.
Right.
Now your next venture is Spider-Man, right?
I saw Spider-Man on Broadway.
You did?
I did, one of the few. My father-in-law had a connection to someone within the show that was in his men's group at his church, so he took us to see Spider-Man, and actually I really liked it.
Okay.
I think I'm the only one in the world, but it was so different from anything I had ever seen, and it was something that you could never do in community theater. It was one of the few shows that I went, okay, that is never going to be licensed by a community theater. It's never going to be possible.
If you could pick a musical
Yes.
that you would want to do a rendition of, a production of, what would be like some of the top ones? Is there one in particular to say, well, that would be my dream?
John can answer first because I know he's got,
Well,
my
I have
favorite
a
he won't
long
do because
list.
it's too challenging.
I have a whole long list of shows that I would love to do, and some of them are old traditionals. One of the issues of having 10 different groups in the theater is that you just can't say I'm going to do this show because another group might already have that on their list
Okay.
or have
Well,
done
this is
it.
a
in the
dream
last
thing.
5
This is
years.
a desert
Dream?
island, the one that you think that, there'll be the one for you and your talents that you love and that you could make it.
Well, my dream one when we first started the company was Avenue Q, which we just did last year. We worked from the first year that we were in, that we opened up through to last year to prepare to do Avenue Q. Have you ever seen the show?
It's funny, in the old days, 30s, 40s, 50s, you get a sense of this from watching like old episodes of What's My Line. The current Broadway plays were known to the entire country somehow. It was sort of it was a cultural thing where they knew them.
Well,
Now,
they said there
Avenue
was a
Q, I was
shift.
aware it existed, but it's since the 70s maybe. I mean,
I was
there's
just
been a few
watching a
that are
documentary
little
on
bit
that
famous,
very
but
thing.
it's not in our public consciousness
No,
anymore.
they
It's
won't
not.
be in the top 10, played on the radio. And
Yeah.
it was around the
There's
70s,
no
that's when
hits
that
anymore.
shift
No hits
happened.
coming out of Broadway.
Rarely. It's very, very rare that a hit would come out of a Broadway show that would then cross over into mainstream.
One of my favorite
Culture.
little musical points I like to make is that Hair, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Every cover version that they did, and a lot of them became hits,
Right.
was way better than the original cast version. I mean, it was weird the way that worked out.
Yeah.
From Three Dog Night to Fifth Dimension to there's Quincy Jones. I think there was
So there should be.
like song after song after song in Hair.
I think there's just a different sound. A Broadway singer, a Broadway voice, is not the same as
Yeah.
the pop voice or an R&B voice that you would hear on the radio. And I think there used to be more similarity in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s between the voices you would hear on the stage and the voices you would hear on the radio. And now there's a huge divergence in terms of just the sounds that people are used to hearing.
3.
And if you didn't grow up, I had a
then
grandmother
there's
who
the
loved
cable
Broadway.
form.
and
It's
took
its
us
own-
to see
it's
shows
its
all
own
the time.
aesthetic.
It's its own
Its own
aesthetic.
aesthetic,
It's
own
a really
style.
good way to put
It's a
it.
brand, it's related to classical. It's like
Right.
in music, the saxophone and flute. You know, if you're a flutist, you can also probably play the saxophone because it's similar fingering.
Similar, the embouchure.
But, I mean,
Clarinet to saxophone, I'll give you.
well, whenever I see a flutist, they always they double up on sax.
Sometimes.
I mean, it's like
If they're a
again
woodwind
and again and
specialist.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's this, for whatever reason, and I think it's intrinsic. You know, the classical people can make that jump over to Broadway.
And more current Broadway has a more pop sound, like Rent. You know, that probably you've heard of, that then was turned into a movie. Like, that's a more pop soundtrack. Or Wicked is a more pop sounding soundtrack than, for example, like, you know, a Guys and Dolls or a Sound of Music or something that's old school. So there's more.
Or Ethel Merman. People, there's
Ethel
no,
Merman, like
there's
Gypsy.
no Ethel Mermans anymore. There's no Carol Channings, right?
There are, but they, yeah.
I mean, really idiosyncratic singers.
Right.
Well, and also in the early days of Broadway that we consider to be the golden years, the people who were writing popular tunes were the ones that were writing the Broadway shows. So
Irving Berlin and.
so they
Right,
were
but
what
these
people
were
were
these were
listening
the best
to.
songwriters in the country.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just that they were the best, they were what people expected, is what people were used to hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Now the people who are writing Broadway shows are not the popular, they're not the
Yeah.
rock stars
Well,
and things that people are used
and
to.
people-
Except Spider-Man with
Right.
you two, and that didn't go very well. So,
They do
because
it,
the
they
Broadway
do it
crowd
as
didn't
a
like it.
late career move.
Right.
But see, in those days, I mean, like Broadway tunes would become standards, which would be done by Frank Sinatra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Who would have pop hits. Or become part of the popular lexicon.
It just makes it harder to draw a crowd to see a musical than it would have been television, pre-movies, pre-YouTube, internet. Now you really have to compel people to come to see something live on stage that will be a completely different experience than they can get in their living room.
Yeah.
And that's why Shrek is a good kind of like a gateway drug to musical theater, because
Well, so-
it's very familiar and appealing.
You don't have understudies.
No. The thing about
If somebody's
community,
sick, they're really,
And you're on.
you want to
Yeah.
And even my 10-year-old
You're the understudy.
my 10-year-old just did a show in the fall, and she was sick. She was sick to her stomach and throwing up all day, and she was the only child in the show. It was White Christmas, Irving Berlin's White Christmas. So no one else in the cast could do her role. And I said, guess what? You're going on, and Mommy will be backstage with a bucket if you need it, and that's the way it goes. And
Wow.
she pulled it together, because you have no choice. You do the best you can.
Probably most of the people who are active in theater in this country are in community theater. There's only, Broadway is only one small place in New York
Right.
City.
you occasionally read that community theater is a feeding ground into regional theater, which is a feeding ground into Broadway. That's where they get their first start. You're not going to be able to walk out of school and get into a regional show or get into a Broadway show unless you're extremely, extremely lucky and talented. Not just talented, lucky.
Right. Well, and some people also.
Talent plus luck. And anyone who thinks otherwise, unless a lot of talented people out there, some of them are merely think they're talented, and there's people
Absolutely.
who are talented, and how do you get attention?
Right.
Luck. Or know somebody or something.
Have the right situation
A friend
show
of
up.
mine,
You walk into
wife.
something where you were just perfect for it, and they take that opportunity.
Do you have aspirations towards regional theater moving up? Or some people see the writing on the wall and say, I've got my life, and I'd like to do that, but it's just not practical.
Well, and sometimes, I would be moving in the opposite direction. When I was younger and in college, I did a lot of professional performing, and then got married. I have 2 children. I teach full time. That's what I enjoy doing. It's nice to be able to fulfill that creative side without it being putting food on my table. It's not as much pressure.
Well, also, with the
It's just
family,
fun, right.
what are you going to do?
I'm not touring around. I'm not going to say I can't come to your dance recital because I have a performance.
Or
it's not
mommy's
like
going to
this.
go live her dream somewhere else.
Yes, I don't think they would be a fan of that.
What were you
Once
doing?
in a while, my 14-year-old might be a fan of that, but not
Are they
long-term.
musical?
Yes, both of the girls are musical. And my husband is very funny and on stage as
I
well.
thought you two were married. Kind of like a team.
No, he's
Spock and McCoy.
my husband's
Can't
on
you tell I'm
the
taller
on
than
the
she is?
So is my husband taller. So is everyone taller than me. My husband's on the board also. Of kind of what happened is I got to know them and did some work with them, and they brought me onto the board. And then he has so many valuable skills to offer. Also, he's a photographer. He does web design. So then they brought him on the board.
What were you in though before you got married though? You're in Peyton Place or something, or you?
No. I did a lot of. I was more of a classically trained singer. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
that was the kind of thing that I was doing. I actually did not do as much theater when I was younger, and now I'm. No.
So you were operatic?
Yes.
Wow.
And classical, and then now I think I'm
It
just
made the
more.
turn.
That's like
more
being a
I'm more
pro
willing to, make a fool of myself now that I teach and have kids. I have no shame anymore, and I'm a much better actress for it
Wow.
because I'm not as inhibited as I was when I was younger. So
What grades do you teach in
I
school?
teach elementary music, so kindergarten through 5th.
Okay. So I was thinking in high school you might.
I teach elementary art.
You do? Where do you teach?
East Windsor.
Okay, I'm in Pennsonsbury, in Pennsbury.
Oh, that's big.
Best job there is.
That's a big, they pay
You asked
well.
my daughter.
Pennsbury, they're one of the highest paying.
You can't afford it.
Not
I read that
anymore.
in the paper.
They were 15, 20 years ago. We are not the highest paying anymore. I have no complaints. It's a great job. Summers off time with my kids, and I love what I do all day, but
Big high school, right? You were teaching high school, all elementary, you said.
elementary. I started off teaching high school. I actually worked my way backwards. I taught college, high school, middle school, and now settled in elementary school.
And this is different, I mean, the demands of costume design in this show, it's at a higher level than, say, I don't know, Death of a Salesman.
Right, because in Death of a Salesman, you can go to Goodwill and probably pick up some stuff. That's what we like to call out of
There's
closet.
X amount of characters, and they just talk,
Right, and you can get a men's jacket from 10 years ago that you can make look very easily like something from 50 years ago. But, yeah, there's not many witches outfits out there that look quite right, or Pinocchio outfits, or Shrek or Fiona. Those are classic looks that you have to say, we have to put our own spin on it, but it really should be recognizable to the audience as Pinocchio, as a witch, as Shrek.
I mean,
as
these are
Fiona.
outfits that you're creating that people would never typically go around wearing.
Correct. And since the show is new to the area, there's not many people out there with these. Because you can do one of the older shows, you could do Guys and Dolls or whatever, and be able to call one of the dozen theaters in the area that's done the show and say, do you have any of the old costumes left? Yeah, so, do you have a Nathan Detroit jacket? Do you have a couple of the fedora hats? You'd be able to collect some of this stuff from them to help out. There's only, right now, I think there's, I think Allentown High School is finishing up their production of Shrek, but they're all like smaller people.
Oh.
So it's not like we can go there and say our adults are going to be wearing their outfits. But we've been helping them out. We built some of our props early so they could use it in their show.
Did you see the Allentown production?
We're going tomorrow night to see it.
I mean, just for fun. I mean, you just want to.
Well, we're going because our friends, or people that are producing it and directing it, are friends of ours who've been in our shows and worked with us in the past. We're also going to see the stuff that we didn't supply them, to see if maybe any of that we could probably borrow to use in our show to save some costs on our end as well.
When I was a senior in high school, I was in B.B. Newworth's class. So right there on stage doing musicals, we had B.B. Newworth. I mean, who later became a huge, one of the most known Broadway stars going right these days.
Yeah, I remember working with a director who'd been in shows with me before, and she was directing a show that when she was in high school, she was in it with Henry Winkler.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's a political show you don't see that much anymore. But she actually had pictures of when she was in the show, and there's like a young Henry Winkler standing next to her when she was doing it. This was before he became famous.
What other shows have you done?
Our company?
Besides, that you've been involved in the last, 10 years.
Well, let's see, we did The Foreigner, Winnie the Pooh, two different children's productions of Winnie the Pooh.
And the children's production is going to be more interesting, probably.
Well, the children's productions are only an hour long. We normally do several in a day. They are directed straight to the younger audience. In fact, that was one of the things when we were getting ready for Avenue Q. We decided, Avenue Q, which is last year, we started in 2004. In 2005, we did a production of Winnie the Pooh where we built puppets for all of the characters as our way to sort of learn the technique of puppetry, learning how to build puppets, learning how to design, learning how to teach people who don't know puppetry. So we started back then designing and building puppets with no knowledge other than what we could glean from the internet and a bunch of DVDs and pictures or books that we collected.
You didn't have anybody who was a
No.
puppet guy.
No, I had. I was-
Now he's the puppet guy.
I'm the puppet guy right now, because I built puppets for those two shows. I built puppets for Seussical. I built puppets for several bleak shows that don't normally have puppets.
He won a Perry Award for his puppets for Seussical.
Well, the props won. That was just one of the things for props.
I think that's why the props won.
The Perry Awards are the New Jersey
Speaking as the
Community
director.
Theater Awards.
Okay.
And every year in September, 800 different community theater people get together in a big black tie event, and different shows are awarded on different topics. So I've done a whole series of puppet-oriented things based on that, working our way towards doing this big puppet production, which is Avenue Q.
Did you see the article in the New York Times a couple months ago? It was about the wages that the union stagehands make in Broadway.
Especially...
You heard about that?
Yes, especially the ones in the opera companies. There was the opera company in New
Yeah.
York. Yeah, they...
It's like 200, 300, 400 grand. And they claim, well, we do a lot of work.
They have a very
somebody's paying for it.
Yeah, they have a very specific skill set that is very hard to find these days.
Absolutely.
Some of them.
Well, it's that way with musicians
But they're
too.
being paid that because of blackmail, essentially. I mean, they say, we'll just pay them, you know. I mean, $400,000 for a stagehand?
But if that stagehand is the only one who knows how to do a specific thing that needs to happen, then that's where they get the power to make those demands. When you're working with union musicians, because generally, like if I'm music directing a show at Kelsey, we're paying the musicians, but nowhere near scale. They're retired music teachers, they're people who really love to play, but this is not their bread and butter either. If you bring in union musicians and they are scheduled to be there from 7 to 9, you could be in the middle of a piece, in the middle of a show.
Goodbye.
9 o'clock, they're out.
Yeah.
Because their skill set is so in demand that they can make those demands. And I think it's the same thing that you're saying with those stagehands. Yes, it seems like a really high amount of money, but clearly someone's willing to pay it because their skills necessary.
I got the sense in the article that, I mean, the 400 is just because of union pressure, and it's not like, you know, you could hire somebody else, I think. Yeah,
Right.
Well, also you have to think, when you think of stagehand, you think of the person who's moving the scenery. These are the riggers, the people who are hauling tons of scenery into the fly system and have to be able to control that, to balance it. They're engineers. There's a lot of other stuff that goes behind that. They make a mistake and tons of scenery fall on someone's head.
Right. It's a complicated job, but you know what? I do a complicated job, and I'm a janitor, and I make, you know, I can't, you know, 10%.
Not for
10% of that.
$100,000.
Yeah, it's like, you know, we all work hard, you know. It's like,
Right.
I just have to believe that them making that money, it makes the ticket prices go way to the sky.
There's a lot of reasons why ticket prices are just out of control. And Broadway is, you know, I listen to the Sirius XM has a Broadway station that I listen to often, and they're doing interviews with producers, not just with actors, and it's Broadway's really in a rough spot right now because no one can afford to just casually go in and see a show on Broadway. So unless you've got
It
a
would be a
show,
tourist who's just saying, I'm in New York, I'm gonna spend.
yeah, but I mean, when you have really, if you don't have a name, if you don't bring in a Daniel Radcliffe or like a television personality who's going to make a cameo appearance in your show and bring in people, if you just have the hard-working Broadway actors in a non-name production, it can't survive. It just can't. There isn't a lot of space for that on Broadway right now. There's a lot of gimmick stunt casting to put butts in seats because it's too expensive of a proposition.
There's very few named Broadway stars that people know outside of the theater community.
There's not a large audience community of people who are Broadway aficionados, I assume.
Right.
You know, if there is, it's an older crowd.
Well, that's part of the problem. And that's even at a smaller scale. What we're dealing with at Kelsey Theater now is that, you know, a lot of supporters of theater are traditionally older because that was what they grew up with. Like you were saying, that was the pop culture of their time, to go to the theater. And then when you're trying to introduce them to these newer, more contemporary shows, it's not always their aesthetic. But yet the younger generation is not always as familiar with theater. So we're trying to build a new generation of theater consumers at this point.
What are some of your favorite cast recordings?
I love Chess. That's a great cast recording. I love Wicked. I love Sondheim, but that's probably the least accessible of Broadway shows.
He's more out there.
It's very cerebral and out
He'll
there.
do some dissonant.
A lot of dissonance. Yeah, and I just did a Sondheim show that I was on stage last year. That's my favorite. It was my dream role that I wanted to play my entire life. But it's a show that you either love it or you hate it. Some people just it's not their thing. You have to think about it to watch it. It's not a show that you can just go and kick back and relax for 2 hours.
Your favorites they're not traditional classic, 30s, 40s, 50s.
My favorites are all over the place. I have a
It
really
seems that you have
diverse.
a deep love for something that's relatively contemporary.
I like what I like, and there isn't always a common thread. And I think a lot of people are that way. That you just something, you like it, and you can't always put your finger on why you like it. I like something that's a little unexpected. I don't like predictable in music or in plot lines. So anything that's gonna, toss me a curve when I think it's gonna go left, it goes right.
You pay attention to it. I mean, you
Yes.
survey these things. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's you're a fan of the genre.
Yes.
I mean, not too many people are.
No. But you don't have to be to enjoy Shrek the musical. Which is
No.
nice.
No, this it's a kind of it's a family kind of thing.
Absolutely.
It was a broad, fun movie for all ages.
All ages. And the musical is that as well. I mean, it has some classic elements. It's got a huge tap number to start Act 2. That's, a throwback to the classic Broadway musical. But then it has all kinds of, very contemporary, silly, crazy effects. A lot of music that does sound like something you could hear off the radio.
Is Toy Story the musical yet?
They have been tossing that around.
Yeah, that's kind of a natural. Now that'll be some
That would
fun.
be fun too. I think the new Disney one that's coming to Broadway is actually Mary Poppins is leaving and Aladdin is moving in right now on Broadway.
So that'll be the next
So
one.
that'll be
that
a
comes up.
big one.
Disney had this second resurgence.
They sure did, with Little Mermaid starting there.
and making truly fun movies.
Oh yeah,
I mean, we're right back to the old days.
absolutely. Frozen is, I think, the best movie they've made in years, and and that's a Broadway singer. I mean, the voices that are in Frozen, which is the big hot Broadway, the Disney movie that all the kids are seeing right now.
Yeah.
Idina Menzel is the voice of the lead, and she is a Broadway actress.
Yeah, I can't keep up with this stuff. I hadn't really. I knew of Frozen maybe vaguely.
Okay.
But now I want to see it.
It's fantastic. It's a really, really well done movie. And it's one of the few Disney movies where the central characters, it's not the girl in pursuit of romance finds her prince and lives happily ever after. It's a very more contemporary. I think a lot of mothers of my generation were concerned with taking their daughters to see, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, where the pretty little girl has to find her prince. And it's nice that Disney's moving in a direction of some women of substance in their movies.
Yeah, but they still have to kill off the parents, so.
Almost always, and that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
can't be
your
Disney.
job
Mother.
fun.
I noticed very early
Yes.
on that it's the mother.
Usually
Even
it's
if
the mother.
Both in
Then
Frozen.
they went to
Immediately,
father.
both in Frozen.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you have a
the
favorite
parents
kind-
are like, we're going off on a boat ride. It's like, don't go.
Do
It's
you have
a
a
Disney
do you have a
movie.
favorite kind of fake blood?
Very kind of freak.
don't.
Fake
Random
blood.
conversation.
All fake blood tends to stain, and we have to. When you're renting or borrowing costumes, you can't stain anything. So I don't have any kind
He's
of.
a fan of the real kind of blood. Did you
Oh.
slice your hand when you were making sets for the last show?
Yeah, I
Wanted
did.
the
I-
emergency
Oh
room.
dear. Oh my God.
He goes
It was
old
a
school.
compound drill. So it was, and actually, I wasn't the one who was doing it. I was holding the piece, and my hand was far away, and his hand slipped and went like that, and went right into my thumb.
What was that famous case? It was a real murder. I think in an opera house where it wasn't solved for decades, and like finally they figured it out. There was some staging.
Phantom of the Opera is not real.
No. This was from maybe from the 80s or
Really?
early.
There was
There was a
actually
real
a
murder,
mystery.
and it was they could not figure it out for decades.
Was this the one that was on stage? That somebody killed someone on stage?
No. I think it was in the background. It was just it sort of happened in the rafters.
Mhm.
I'll have to look it
It
up.
sounds like one of those Murder, She Wrote episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been.
CSI.
Mhm. So
Or
I
you-
missed out on the fun. So you're from the Trek the Musical, which
Mhm.
I was,
We're from Maurer Productions on stage.
okay,
Laurie is the director, and I'm one of the producers.
okay, right. And, oh, it's coming to the Kelsey Theater.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you're the musical director as opposed to.
For this one, I'm the director.
Oh, you're the director.
I'm the
Okay.
director. Yep. So I was the musical director for 4 or 5
Avenue Q.
Avenue Q and Spamalot and Drowsy Chaperone and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Mhm.
And then it was.
So are you directing, are you also directing the music?
No,
Okay.
I tried that once, doing both.
You're not doubling.
It is very, very difficult to pay attention to what you're looking at and blocking and character development and also to the music. It's better.
It helps. Do you have to sort of, now you've got very strong musical instincts,
Mm-hmm.
and do you have dialogue with the musical director?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
There's really only one music director who I work with because I would be jumping in and changing and correcting, and I trust him implicitly. And he also
It's hard to do that politically,
defers.
you know, without stepping on.
We've got a great relationship,
Yeah.
and he, you know, I have my hand in the music more than most directors would. When we were casting, generally the director is looking at their acting chops, and the music director is looking at their vocals. And because I'm a musician, I can't separate that way. You know,
Right.
I'm aware of.
It's a
I'm aware.
package.
If someone is a terrible singer, I don't even care.
Right.
If they're the best
The hell
actor
with
in the
it.
world, because I know they're a terrible singer, and I wouldn't ask my music director to work with someone who's terrible.
It's like they made that Johnny Cash movie, I Walk the Line,
Mhm.
and Joaquin Phoenix decided
Right.
he was going to sing it himself.
Yeah.
God, was he awful.
Or like the Les Mis.
What
movie.
was he even
It was
thinking?
so-
Like everybody was so down on us.
Yes.
I want
And you
that
know what? I
line.
really thought people are just being too hard on him because
I
musical theater people love to hate. Like they love to go to see a musical theater movie and rip it to shreds. I'm thinking it can't be that bad. It was pretty bad.
Oh, the knives
the
are
rest,
out.
The rest of the movie was fantastic. But then, you know,
What's her name?
Anne Hathaway, she's stunning, amazing, and who would have known that she was that amazing at the same
Now,
time?
let me, the person that's Shrek, is it like the cartoon where you have a part of the time they're a troll and another part
Oh,
of
for
the
like
time-
Fiona?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's part of the trick is that she's a princess and she's an ogre and then she's a princess again and then she's an ogre briefly and
Yeah,
princess
she has
and
to
she goes
change
back
to
and
an
forth.
ogre twice during the show.
Oh, I can't,
Shrek is an ogre the entire
Shrek
time.
is an ogre the whole time.
okay.
Fiona
24/7.
It's
changes.
Fiona. Okay,
Right.
it's Fiona. That's interesting. Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
And
You
it's
pull that off,
that's
yeah.
part of the trick in the way the show was written. That the first time you see her as an ogre, she's just in silhouette against the moon, so that you get a glimpse that maybe
Yeah.
she's going to be an ogre, and then you see her in shadows in a barn, and then finally she makes the transformation that you have. I'm not going to tell you our secret of how we do it, but she has to. It's a really quick and it's
You
an
have a magic
amazing.
pill.
That's what we do.
Yeah,
She's
we-
actually going to change. That's how we're doing it.
And people know what Shrek looks like, so we have to try and come as close to the look of the.
Making a human being
As
look
possible.
like an ogre.
So you work within parameters.
Right. Like some of it you can really be free to express yourself and have your own creative ideas, but people have an expectation when they're coming to see a character that's beloved.
Mhm.
If I decided Shrek was going to be pink
No, no.
and not an ogre, you know, that wouldn't be true to the
That'd be called
character.
Well, yeah, I
reimagining.
mean, even from this little ticket, you can see
Yeah,
that
reboot.
you're gonna
Oh,
agree with
absolutely.
the, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have your Fiona now?
We
cast?
do. We have our whole cast. We start, the first rehearsal is Sunday, so I can't wait
Uh-huh.
to see them together and hear them and